To save costs, she cut my overtime. Not reduced it, not asked me to scale back, cut it entirely. The system will be fine, my boss insisted, standing at the front of the budget review room with a slide showing my name highlighted in red next to the words Legacy Resource Optimization Opportunity. My name is Harvey Walsh. I'm 48 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was a senior infrastructure architect at a logistics technology company called TechFlow Solutions. What I actually did was keep a $95 million orchestration system from collapsing under its own complexity while everyone else assumed it just worked by magic. She said it with the kind of confidence people use when they've never actually touched the thing they're talking about. I was sitting 3 seats down the conference table, hands folded, watching her present my work, 24 years of building, maintaining, and quietly saving a supply chain platform that handled everything from order routing to warehouse coordination as if it were an expense problem that could be solved with a policy memo. Behind her, the projector displayed a bar chart showing my overtime hours over the last 4 quarters, each bar higher than the last, colored in accusatory red like I'd committed some kind of fraud by keeping the company's most critical system alive outside business hours. You know what I mean? Like I was doing something wrong by caring about whether orders got processed or warehouses went dark. We're implementing a strict business hours only support model for all non-emergency systems, she continued, clicking to the next slide. Effective immediately, Harvey will no longer be authorized for after-hours work, unless explicitly scheduled through the formal on-call rotation. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room land on me, then quickly dart away. Finance nodded approvingly like they'd just solved world hunger. HR smiled like this was some kind of win for work-life balance. The ops director stared at his laptop, pretending to take notes. Nobody asked the obvious question that was screaming in my head: what happens when the system breaks at midnight? I raised my hand, keeping my voice calm. Just to clarify, I said, you're telling me not to monitor or respond to issues outside standard business hours, even if I see alerts, even if I know it's going to cascade into a full outage. She looked at me like I was being difficult. That's correct, she said. We can't justify paying overtime for a system that's been stable for months. If something happens after hours, it either waits until morning or goes through the general on-call team. The general on-call team doesn't have production access, I said. Then we'll grant it, she replied smoothly. They don't know the architecture, then we'll train them. That takes months. Her smile tightened. Harvey, I appreciate your institutional knowledge, but we can't build operational models around legacy resources being available 24/7. It's not scalable, it's not sustainable, and frankly, it's not modern. Legacy resources, that's what she called me. 24 years of experience and I'm a legacy resource. Like I'm some old server they need to phase out. She turned back to the screen, dismissing me without another word. I didn't argue. I just made a mental note of the exact time, 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and decided right then that I would follow her directive to the letter. No more late-night check-ins, no more weekend patches, no more silent saves. If she wanted to see what fine looked like without me, I'd show her. Her name was Melissa Torres, 36 years old, Harvard MBA, 3 years in management consulting before joining TechFlow as Director of Engineering Operations. She was smart, organized, data-driven. She was also completely disconnected from how the system actually worked, like most of the MBA types I'd seen come and go over the years. Melissa managed budgets, headcount, and vendor contracts. She spoke fluently in OKRs and quarterly reviews and cost per transaction metrics, but she'd never deployed code, never debugged a production issue, never been woken up at 3 a.m. by an alert screaming that the transaction log was full and the system was about to halt in 4 minutes. To her, the platform was a black box with inputs and outputs. Orders went in, shipments came out. As long as the metrics looked good, the system was healthy. And for 24 years, the metrics looked great because I was holding the whole thing together with expertise, vigilance, and about 3 pots of coffee a week during crisis mode. But here's the thing about systems like ours: they're not stable because they're well designed. They're stable because someone who understands them is constantly watching for the little things that go wrong before they become big things. Queue depths creeping up, database logs growing too fast, API timeouts from vendors who change their systems without telling anyone, little blips that turn into catastrophes if nobody's paying attention. TechFlow wasn't a household name, but we were critical infrastructure for mid-sized retailers. We handled order routing, warehouse management, integration, carrier coordination, inventory synchronization, all the invisible plumbing that makes free 2-day shipping possible. Our biggest client was a national home goods retailer with 47 distribution centers. Every order they received flowed through our platform, every shipment. Every inventory update, if our system went down, their entire supply chain stopped. Trucks sat idle. Warehouse workers stared at blank screens. Customer orders disappeared into a digital black hole. The last time we'd had a major outage, 3 years ago before I really got my hands on the architecture, it cost them $11 million in a single weekend. I was brought in specifically to make sure that never happened again, and it didn't. Not once, not until Melissa decided my expertise was too expensive. That evening, I drafted an email, professional, detailed, unemotional. Subject, after hours, support model, system risk documentation. I explained the platform's architecture, the dependencies, the failure modes, the fact that I was the only engineer with full access and deep knowledge of the entire stack across 3 major technology generations. You want documentation? I'll give you documentation. I listed the scenarios that required immediate response. Queue saturation. When message queues filled past 85% capacity, the system would start dropping orders. Recovery required manual queue, rebalancing, and selective message purging. Time to full failure, 15 to 30 minutes. Database log overflow. If transaction logs weren't regularly truncated, the database would halt all writes. Recovery required log backups and careful transaction replay. Time to full failure, 45 to 90 minutes. Carrier API timeouts. If carrier systems became unresponsive, our platform would retry indefinitely, creating a cascading backlog. Recovery required manual API circuit breaking and batch job restarts. Time to full failure, 60 to 120 minutes. I estimated the cost of a full overnight outage. $28 million in delayed shipments, SLA penalties, and potential contract breaches. Then I wrote the paragraph that would matter most when this inevitably ended up in front of the board. Per today's directive, I will no longer monitor system health or respond to alerts outside standard business hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. PST, unless I am formally scheduled and compensated as on-call. Any after-hours incidents will be handled by the designated on-call engineer or deferred until the next business day. This policy change significantly increases the risk of extended outages during high-impact hours. I CC'd Melissa, HR, the Ops Director, the VP of Engineering, and the CTO. I attached a copy of the current on-call rotation, which didn't include anyone with my access level, and a summary of the training requirements for a backup engineer, estimated at 6 months minimum. I reread the email 5 times, removing anything that sounded emotional or insubordinate. What remained was pure documentation, facts, risks, and a clear statement that I would follow the directive exactly as given. I clicked send at 6:47 p.m. Melissa replied at 6:52 p.m. Thanks for the documentation, Harvey. Understood. We'll proceed as planned. The Ops Director replied at 7:01 p.m. Appreciate the thoroughness. The VP of Engineering replied at 7:15 p.m. Noted. Let's discuss backup training options next week. The CTO didn't reply at all. I closed my laptop, walked to my car, and drove home in silence. For the first time in 24 years, I didn't bring my work laptop home. I didn't check the monitoring dashboards before bed. I didn't set my phone to loud just in case. I just stopped. And it felt terrifying and liberating and inevitable. Because the system I'd built, the invisible, fragile, critical system, was about to teach everyone exactly what stable really meant. It meant me, and I wasn't going to be there anymore. The new policy went into effect the following Monday. HR sent me a cheerful notification through the company portal. Your job description has been updated. Please review and acknowledge. I clicked through to the document. Under responsibilities, the section that used to say maintain 24/7 system. Availability through proactive monitoring and rapid incident response now read. Support system operations during standard business hours. Participate in formal on-call rotation as scheduled. Escalate after-hours issues to designated on-call engineer. I clicked acknowledge. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went home at 5 p.m. every single day. No laptop bag, no VPN connection, no monitoring apps on my phone, nothing. Just walked out of that building like a normal person with a normal job. The first few days were quiet. The system hummed along. Keys stayed manageable. The database logs truncated automatically as designed. Vendor APIs behaved themselves. Melissa sent a department-wide email on Thursday. Great work, team. Our new support model is already showing positive results. No after-hours incidents this week, and we're on track for significant cost savings this quarter. I read it and said nothing, because I knew something she didn't. The system wasn't stable because it was well-designed. It was stable because it was lucky. And luck always runs out. On Friday afternoon, our biggest client's marketing team launched a surprise weekend promotion. Flash sale, 40% off everything, free shipping, 48 hours only. They didn't tell us, they didn't warn anyone in operations. They just launched it at 4 p.m. and went home for the weekend. By 6 p.m., order volume was up 340% from the previous Friday. I saw it in the dashboard before I left, queues climbing, API response time slowing, database transaction rate spiking. Not critical yet, but trending in that direction fast. Under the old model, I would have stayed late, adjusted queue thresholds, preemptively scaled up batch processing, monitored vendor API health through the night. Under the new model, I shut down my workstation at 5:02 p.m. and walked out of the building. I went home, made dinner, watched a movie with my ex-wife Nancy. We still got together for dinner sometimes, especially when the kids were home from college. Jennifer was back from nursing school for the weekend, and Kevin had driven down from state. It was nice, sitting around the table like we used to, talking about normal stuff. Jennifer's clinical rotations, Kevin's engineering classes, Nancy's new job at the hospital. At 9:30 p.m., I went to bed. My work phone was off. My laptop was in a drawer. I didn't check the dashboards. I didn't know that at 10:15 p.m., the first critical alert triggered, warning, message queue depth at 87%, approaching saturation threshold. The alert went to Danny Foster, a junior dev who'd shadowed me once for half a day 6 months ago. Danny saw the alert, panicked, tried to log into the platform. Access denied, he tried the VPN, access denied, he didn't have production credentials, nobody had updated his permissions because nobody had thought that far ahead. He called the ops director, no answer, it was Friday night. He called Melissa voicemail. He called the VP of engineering voicemail. At 10:42 p.m., the queue hit 94% capacity and the system started dropping messages. Orders disappeared silently, completely. Danny didn't know how to check message dead letter queues. He didn't know which logs to read. He didn't know that the queue saturation would trigger a cascade that would bring down everything we'd built. At 10:58 p.m., a warehouse inventory sync job failed and went into an infinite retry loop. At 11:17 p.m., the database ran out of log space and halted all write operations. Every subsystem that tried to write data, order processing, inventory updates, shipment tracking froze. The entire platform stopped. $95 million worth of supply chain orchestration. Dead. Danny stared at his screen, watching red alerts multiply like a disease spreading through a body, and did the only thing he could think of. He called me. My phone was off. He called again. No answer. He called 5 more times, nothing but voicemail. At 11:34 p.m., he sent an email to the entire engineering leadership chain with the subject URgent platform down. Need Harvey immediately. At 11:41 p.m., someone from the client's operations team called TechFlow's emergency escalation line. Your system just went dark, they said, and I can imagine the panic in their voice. We have 14,000 orders stuck in limbo. Warehouses are showing 0 inventory. What's happening over there? At 11:58 p.m., the VP of engineering finally saw Danny's emails and called him back. Where's Harvey? He asked. I can't reach him, Danny said, voice shaking. I've called him 7 times. Keep trying. I'm escalating to the CTO. At 12:14 a.m., James Caldwell, our CTO, a man who normally never touched operations because he trusted people like me to handle it, joined an emergency Zoom call with Danny, the VP, Melissa, and 3 warehouse operations managers from the client who'd been dragged out of bed. Status? James asked. Tie loosened, looking like he'd thrown on the first shirt he could find. Platform is completely down. Danny said, I can't access production. I don't know how to restart the jobs. I don't even know what failed first. The alerts are just everywhere. James turned to Melissa, visible on camera despite the late hour, still in business attire because she'd probably been at some networking event. Where's Harvey? He's off call tonight, Melissa said, and I bet she was starting to feel that first flutter of real fear. Per the new support policy, James's expression darkened. You could see it even through the grainy video. Get him on the phone now. Melissa tried calling me. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. She sent an email. Harvey, critical outage. Need you immediately. Call me ASAP. I didn't see it. I was sleeping peacefully in my own bed for the first time in months, dreaming about normal things instead of error codes and cascading failures. At 12:47 a.m., James made a decision. Wake up everyone. Get infrastructure on the line. Get database admins. Get anyone who's ever touched this platform. We're not waiting for Harvey. Over the next hour, 5 bleary-eyed engineers joined the call. None of them had full production access. None of them knew the system well enough to diagnose the root cause. They fumbled through logs, restarted services randomly, tried rebooting servers. Nothing worked because they didn't know what I knew, that you couldn't just restart services. You had to clear the queues first, truncate the logs, reset the sync state, then bring services up in a specific order. It was like trying to perform heart surgery with a manual you'd never read. By 2 a.m., the client had escalated to their executive team. By 2:30 a.m., TechFlow's CEO was on the call, probably wondering how a routine cost optimization had turned into a company-threatening crisis. By 2:34 a.m., James pulled up the email I'd sent 3 weeks earlier and read it slowly, his face draining of color as he realized what they were looking at. The documented warnings, the risk assessment, the timeline predictions, all of it playing out exactly as I'd said it would. "Melissa," he said quietly, and his voice had that dangerous calm that executives get when they're about to end careers. "Tell me you have a backup plan." She hesitated. "We were going to train Danny. It was scheduled for next month. Did you grant him production access?" Silence. "Did you document any of Harvey's procedures?" More silence. James closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, like a man watching his professional reputation crumble in real time. "Call Harvey," he said. "Now, offer him whatever he wants. Get him online." Melissa tried again, no answer. James tried, no answer. By 3:11 a.m., someone suggested driving to my apartment. That's when you know things are truly desperate. When executives are ready to send people to ring doorbells at 3 a.m. At 3 a.m., my doorbell rang. I woke up confused, checked my phone still off, and looked through the peephole. Steve Anderson from infrastructure standing in my hallway looking miserable. I opened the door in my pajamas and robe. "Steve, Harvey," he said, and I could see the relief wash over his face. "I'm so sorry to wake you up. The platform is down. Has been for over 4 hours. Nobody can fix it. We need you." I blinked at him, genuinely confused for a moment. "I'm not on call," I said. "I know," he said quickly. "I know, but Melissa specifically told everyone not to bother you unless it was scheduled, and James is going crazy, and the client is threatening to terminate the contract," and he stopped, took a breath. "The CTO authorized emergency pay, triple overtime, retroactive, whatever you need. Please." I looked at him for a long moment, this guy I'd worked with for 8 years, standing in my hallway at 3:30 in the morning, because the people who called me a legacy resource had just learned what happened when they tried to operate without the legacy. "Let me get dressed," I said. I didn't rush. I made coffee, good coffee, not the instant stuff. I put on actual clothes, not the hoodie I usually wore for middle-of-the-night emergencies. I took my time backing out of the driveway, drove to the office at exactly the speed limit, because for the first time in 24 years, I was going to fix their crisis on my terms. I walked into the building at 40:38 a.m. The war room was chaos. 15 people crammed into the main conference room, laptops everywhere, the big monitor showing dashboard after dashboard of red alerts, coffee cups and energy drink cans scattered across the table like battlefield debris. James saw me walk in and stood up immediately. "Harvey?" I nodded, sat down, pulled out my laptop, and opened the production console for the first time in 8 days. What I saw made my stomach drop. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was worse than I'd feared. Message queues completely saturated, database logs full, sync jobs stuck in fatal retry loops. Order backlog 31,000 and growing. This wasn't a quick fix. This was archaeological reconstruction. Status? James asked. I took a sip of my coffee, still hot, still good. The platform halted because the database ran out of transaction log space. That happened because a warehouse sync job went into an infinite retry loop, which happened because message queues saturated and started dropping orders, which happened because nobody adjusted queue thresholds when order volume spiked last night. I pulled up a timeline on the big screen. First alert was at 10:15 p.m. If someone with access and training had responded then, this would have taken 20 minutes to fix. Now it's going to take hours. James's jaw tightened. How many hours? 7, maybe 8. And that's assuming nothing else breaks while I'm recovering. Melissa spoke up from the back of the room, voice small and shaky. "What do you need?" I turned to look at her directly. "I need everyone who doesn't have production access to leave. I need database admin support on standby. I need the client's ops team to stop calling every 10 minutes asking for updates. And I need you to authorize maintenance mode so I can take the entire platform offline and rebuild it cleanly." James didn't hesitate. "Done. Whatever you need." I started typing. The room went quiet except for the sound of my keyboard and the occasional whispered conversation. Step 1, stop the bleeding. I disabled all inbound order processing. No point accepting new orders when the system couldn't handle them. Step 2, clear the jams. I manually purged corrupted messages from the dead letter queues, thousands of them, each one representing an order that had vanished into the digital void. Step 3, recover the database. I triggered a transaction log backup, truncated the log file, and verified write operations were possible again. Step 4, reset the sync jobs. I killed the retry loops, cleared the job state, and manually synchronized inventory data for all 47 distribution centers. Step 5, restart services in sequence. Order processor first, then inventory sync, then carrier integration, then warehouse routing. Each component had to come online in the right order, or the whole thing would cascade again. At 11:42 a.m., the first clean order processed. At 12:15 p.m., the backlog started draining. At 1:38 p.m., all systems were green. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The war room had emptied out as people realized I had things under control. But James was still there along with the CEO who'd arrived sometime during the recovery. "You saved us," James said quietly. I opened my eyes and looked at him. "I didn't save you. I just stopped the bleeding from a wound you inflicted on yourselves." The CEO stepped forward. "We need to talk," he said. "But first, go home, get some sleep. We'll reconvene Monday for a full postmortem." The postmortem meeting was packed. James, the CEO, Melissa, the VP of engineering, the ops director, HR, legal, finance, even 2 board members who'd flown in specifically for this. This wasn't a routine review, this was a reckoning. James started without preamble. Friday night, our primary supply chain platform went down for 8 hours. 31,000 orders were delayed. Our largest client is demanding explanations and considering contract renegotiation. We're looking at confirmed penalties of $2.8 million, and that's just the immediate impact. He pulled up my timeline. The technical failure was entirely predictable. Harvey documented the exact scenario 3 weeks ago and warned us about the risks. The operational failure was removing the only engineer capable of preventing it. The CEO looked directly at Melissa. "Walk me through the decision-making process." She shifted uncomfortably. "We believed the system was stable enough to handle routine issues without immediate intervention. The cost savings were significant." "How significant?" $38,000 annually in overtime, and the cost of this outage, $2.8 million confirmed, potentially more if the client renegotiates terms. The CEO let that ratio sink in, $74 of damage for every dollar saved. "Harvey, what would you need to prevent this from happening again?" I'd been preparing for this question all weekend. 3 things. First, immediate hiring and training of a backup engineer with full production access. Not planned immediate. I'll train them personally, but it takes 6 months minimum. Done. Second, formal on-call rotation with proper compensation. No more unpaid shadow support. Agreed. Third, I want my title and compensation to reflect my actual role. I'm not maintaining someone else's system. I'm the system. I want VP of Engineering, Infrastructure Systems, with direct authority over operational policy and a salary that reflects the value I bring. The CEO looked at the damage assessment still displayed on the screen. What kind of increase are we talking about? 45% base salary increase. Equity package. And when I say something needs 4 weeks instead of 2, people listen. Done. Melissa was reassigned that afternoon. Special projects, they called it, which everyone knew was corporate speak for "we can't fire you yet, but start looking for another job." She was gone within 2 months. 6 months later, I had my trained backup, Laura Kim, a brilliant engineer who understood that systems were living things that needed constant attention. We had a real on-call rotation, we had proper change control, and we had something else, respect. When the system faced its next crisis, another surprise promotion, another volume spike, it handled it automatically. Laura caught the early warning signs, approved the auto-scaling response, and sent me a brief status update the next morning. The platform hummed along perfectly. That's when I knew we'd really won. Not because I was irreplaceable, but because I'd built something that could replace me. So here's what I learned, and here's what you need to know if you're the person in your organization who keeps things running while everyone else assumes it just works by magic. Document everything, know your value, and when someone tells you your decades of experience are legacy resources they don't need, get it in writing. Because eventually they'll learn either by listening to you or by paying millions to learn the hard way. Your expertise isn't old-fashioned. It's the foundation everything else stands on.